So this is our story of me, Nicholas Smith, and Phoebe Snedker. We first met in the garden of the Royal Oak pub in Swindon on Friday the 30th of November 2018, where less than a week previous I was on a shopping trip with a very close friend of mine, and I remember just as we were going down the escalators I said, I'm that lucky when it comes to things like this, that if soulmates even do exist, and I don't think that they do, but mine probably lives on the other side of the world. So let's stop talking about it. Now, Phoebe was in the UK with her father to celebrate her grandmother's 80th birthday, but was in the Royal Oak that night with her dad because Giles' best friend from school just happened to live opposite. I was meeting an old friend of mine who was already in a bar just round the corner, but managed to convince him to go to the Royal Oak because the atmosphere is generally a little bit better earlier on a Friday evening. And so we were out the back chatting when Phoebes and her father and Phil came over, and we were just general kind of chit chat really, but Phoebe told us that she was over here visiting and she wanted to visit London but didn't know what to do or how to get there, or even if she was even going to make it there. So obviously, as two British gents, we offered our services as tour guides and also our sofa. So we skipped forward a few days because I hadn't heard from Phoebe, and I just thought it was one of those conversations that you have with people out the back of pubs and bars some nights, and you'll never hear from them again, and that's absolutely fine. But I was here at Passy Young restaurant with my best friend a few hours before meeting up with Phoebe, and he said, what's the plan? What is this, like a first date? What is it? What are you, a tour guide? I said, I don't know, just a tour guide. Someone had looked after me when I went to New York. A friend of a friend put me up for a few days, and I'll never forget that. And I think in my head, I just wanted to kind of pay that back in a way. So if I can look after someone for a few days, give them some suggestions of where to go and make sure they're happy and they're safe, then that's all it needs to be. And so that's what we did. And I met Phoebe at Euston Station that afternoon. We took her bags back to the apartment. Well, we got off the tube at London Bridge because I can't stand the Jubilee line at 5-6 o'clock in the afternoon. And it was raining, but I think getting rained on is better than being on the Jubilee line. Either ways, we got back, Phoebe got changed. We stopped off at my favourite bar in London called Village East. There was about an hour and a half wait for food, so I said, fine, let's go somewhere else. So we walked through London Bridge, through Borough Market, settled on Wagamama's on Clink Street, where we had dinner, had a nice chat. Phoebe very generously paid for dinner, and then we took a walk over the river to the St Paul's area of London, where I asked her, are you a fan of the TV show First Dates? And she said she was. And I said, well, the restaurant they film it in is literally that one just there. So we popped in, we had a drink, we had another drink, before we headed back to my favourite bar in Village East on Bermondsey Street, where we were up in the cocktail bar upstairs, trying to figure out what this couple were doing. It was almost like they're on a first date. They were kind of shy and nervous and a bit awkward, but it looked like, it appeared that they'd seen each other naked because they were kind of semi-comfortable, but not quite, and it was a bit hard to... It was fun trying to figure it out, but that's kind of besides the point. Our seats, and they're quite heavy seats, so I was kind of struggling to distance them a tiny bit. So we were sat almost kind of face to face, me and Phoebe, when we were talking, and that's the first time I got to kind of look into her eyes and just, the most beautiful eyes I think I've ever seen. Just before we headed back to the flat, true to form, Phoebe wanted to grab a few more drinks, and we stayed up the whole night just kind of talking and having a few drinks, and watched Closer, featuring Jude Law and Natalie Portman, which ironically is a film about a handsome British chap falling in love with a younger girl from overseas. Who knew? Either ways, it got to about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I realised that I had to leave for work. I had to get out of London to be teaching the next day, and I remember being in King's Cross Station, and I was really upset because I couldn't find the platform I was supposed to be on until a little voice in my head said, you need to be in St Pancras, mate, you're in the wrong station. I was like, oh okay, that's fine. And it was a weird kind of thing, so I don't think I've ever felt that sleep deprived but happy of meeting someone at the same time. So it was all a bit of a thing, but it was good. And whilst I was at work that day, Phoebe was wandering around London. She got her tattoo and had said that she had a really nice day. And for a few hours that evening, before Phoebe went out, we just hung out at the flat and talked a bit more, because she was due to meet an old friend of hers in Soho. And it just kind of dawned on me around that kind of time that Phoebe was getting ready that, you know, I've got to go to work again in the morning. You're probably going to get home late after a night out, so probably not going to see each other again. So I said, well, you know, I'll jump on the tube with you just to make sure that you get to meet your friend, you know, nice and safely. And so we did, and then when I dropped her off, I got back down to the tube station at Oxford Circus. I remember just being stood on the platform, and I think it was genuinely the saddest I think I've ever felt. Because I had such an amazing couple of days hanging out with Phoebe, and now it was very much the case that I'm probably never going to see her again. And I don't want that to be the end, but, you know, what can you do? Rather fortunately for me, Phoebe was a tad hungover. And even more fortunately, the people I was teaching that day said, you know, we need to finish early if we can. We've got our Christmas do tonight. I said, well, yeah, that's absolutely fine. So I said to Phoebe, you know, sleep it off, hang out if you want, stay another night if you want, and then maybe, you know, get the train up to Leeds tomorrow. I could even drive you, possibly, if you wanted to. So I got back that night, and then me and Phoebe went to Westfield Shopping Centre in Stratford in East London, where we went for dinner at Giraffe. Just as we were about to go into Giraffe, I remember seeing this look of disgust on Phoebe's face. And she told me that it was because she saw a lady eating a pizza with a knife and fork. Now that look of disgust is going to come up again very soon, so pay attention. And we did what normal people do. We posed for a cheesy photo. We did a bit of shopping before we went back to the flat to actually try and get a little bit of sleep for the first time in a few days. So the next day we had to get the train from London back to Swindon so I could get my car and drive Phoebe up to Leeds. And there's a picture of Phoebe having fun in the car. And I think, again, the only reason I offered to do it is because I wanted to see her for as long as possible before I knew that I might not get the chance to ever again. And Phoebes had mentioned that she was going over to Dublin for a few days and said to me, you know, you can come. And it was one of those situations where I didn't know if she was being serious or not, but either ways, I accepted. And we were due to meet up in Dublin a few days later after she'd been with her friend in Leeds for a few days. Now, I've driven back from Leeds and the north of England many times over the years, to the point where I don't even bother having my sat-nav on. There's no point. I know the roads. It's literally 6 roads and it's a couple of 100 miles. So what I decided to do with that time was practice my wedding speech, obviously, and sing love songs like anyone else would do in that situation. If anyone else was, you know, 12-year-old girl. But I became terribly lost. My brain was elsewhere, to the point that I think I started seeing signs for Northampton, which, if you're not quite sure of geography, Leeds to Swindon, Northampton is not on that line. So after a casual 3.5 hour detour, I managed to get home, and me and Phoebe spoke over the few days, and yeah, I was looking forward to going to Dublin and we can hang out for a few more days before she went to Oz. And so we skipped to Monday the 10th of December. Phoebe had missed her flight to Dublin and very upset, so I said, okay, well, let's put you on a different flight. In fact, let's try and get you on my flight from Bristol so I can come and pick you up. We can hang out at mine for the night, I say mine, my parents' house, and then we can go to Dublin together in the morning. We can get a lift there. Now, I'm not a massive fan of flying, so I don't tend to sleep the night before flights, as you can see from those bags under my eyes. But that day we walked around Dublin. That evening we went for dinner at a lovely tapas bar with Phoebe's friend Darcy. We had a few drinks, and that look of disgust that I mentioned earlier on regarding the lady with her pizza, that face times about 1,000. When it was my round at the bar, I ordered 2 double rums for Phoebe and Darcy, and I just thought it'd be prudent at that point to get a bottle of water. And to anyone that's ever considering dating an Australian, do not buy a bottle of water on a night out. And the next day, because it was just before Christmas, obligatory photo with Santa Claus. And that night, we just kind of went around Dublin again, around the city centre. Phoebe got some shoes. We went to M&S and just grabbed loads and loads of snacks before we got back to the hotel for the last night. And watched P.S. I Love You, featuring Hilary Swank and Gerard Butler. Because the next day was going to be potentially stressful. Now, I'm not great with logistics, but the simple point was that Phoebe had to be at Heathrow to fly back to Australia. We were in Dublin. Phoebe's flight out of Dublin was to Stansted, where she had to get to our flat in Bermondsey, then to Paddington, and then to Heathrow to get her flight. I had to get from Dublin to Swindon by my dad picking me up from Bristol Airport, grabbing Phoebe's backpack, meeting her at Heathrow. Hopefully she managed to get on her flight on time. But then even as I was driving there, I was thinking, is it the worst thing in the world if she doesn't catch her flight? It's nearly Christmas. It's nice to meet new people. But I thought, no. We just about managed to pull it off. Phoebe made her flight on time. And we said our goodbyes. And just as we were saying our goodbyes, I had this thought that Phoebe could just delete me or block me on Facebook. And I've got no way of ever contacting her or ever seeing her again. So I was really nervous for a wee while. And Phoebe said, don't be ridiculous, you're being silly. I was like, well, we both have that option. Either way, we said our goodbyes, we said we would keep in touch. And then Phoebe flew home. And I was very sad.